Hey everyone, welcome to the 150th edition of DF Direct Weekly. We were looking to do some kind of special event, but it turns out that Microsoft and Sony have done it for us with a couple of interesting / potentially alarming, potentially sort of okay announcements. Who knows? A lot to go through, but before we do that, a quick shout out to store.digitalfoundry.net. If you want to indulge in our merchandising wares and help to support the channel, that would be great. And stuff like the new bespoke shirt, which will be available, but not in this colour. That will be coming soon, along with other stuff. But first of all, joining me, John Linneman. Hello.
Rich, yeah, this morning I've been thinking about the Brender engine. You remember that? The blazing render from Argonaut Software that powered hits such as Carmageddon 2, Croc, Privateer 2, The Darkening, and even Doctor Who, Destiny of the Doctors. I don't know if you played it.
Privateer engine, really?
Yeah, Privateer 2, The Darkening.
Okay. Is it coming to PlayStation 5?
Probably. I don't know. I mean, I wish Brender was still around. I played FX Fighter and that. It was good stuff.
Is there any totally non-tangential random stuff you'd like to put a shout out to, Alex Battaglia?
Well, I found this the other day on the street.
Oh, what?
Can you recognize what it is? It's a PS2
it's an AT to PS2.
Yeah.
Or
I found this on the street the other day, and I just thought it was so cool that I had to pick it up. I don't know if I'll ever use it recently.
For this, yeah.
I mean, man,
what the frick?
Berlin is one of the most beautiful cities on the, diese zu verschenken boxes that people put outside, and you just find. I found a Pentium 3 system.
Okay.
Once outside.
Okay, so it's literal retro pickups.
See, the thing that's happened though, Rich, is like thanks to us making CRTs popular again, you no longer really find CRTs on the curb, you find LCDs. Yeah. And unlike CRTs where I would throw them in the back of a van, I just run over and punt the LCDs, make sure there's a big hole in the middle.
Okay.
No, wait, I don't actually do that. That's just a joke.
Okay, so there are more pressing matters that we should attend to, so let's get to it. Okay, first news story of the week. We're filming this the morning after the night before, where Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, and Matt Booty from Xbox produced their business update in podcast form. Now, this was quite interesting because obviously over the past few weeks, there's been like a gathering storm of controversy surrounding an apparent move from Xbox being kind of like a semi-exclusive platform into more sort of overt plans to go multi-platform. This podcast attempted to address that. I'm still a bit confused about what the strategy is, but there's a lot of other stuff in there that we've got to talk about, specifically this concept that every screen is an Xbox, but more excitingly, perhaps, the idea that the next Xbox is being touted as the largest technical leap. John, where do you want to start here? Let's talk about the exclusive side. Obviously, it's been rumoured for some time that titles like Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves would be coming to other platforms, which makes sense, right? Pentiment is another one. As Phil said in the podcast, these are games that can either benefit from a much larger audience, a much larger community, or they're titles that weren't like quadruple A juggernauts that are system sellers for Xbox, but would find a nice home on other systems. And I think Pentiment is the title that's sort of being talked about. What was your reaction to Phil's sort of disclosures here? Because it was kind of a bit strange from my perspective that essentially there is confirmation that those titles are going to go multi-platform, but then the point of contention since then has been that it's the beginning of other titles, the AAA juggernauts, moving to Xbox as well, which Phil is ruling out in the short term, but is kind of, I don't know, I was reading that Ed Verge interview with Tom Warren, and he seems to be hedging a bit about future plans. What do you make of all of this?
I think that's what Phil is very good at, and I think the team as well. They take very great care to ensure that the wording on any statement is such that, one, people will take away what they want to take away from it, but two, right. They can sort of, the plans have a lot of wiggle room, shall we say. And I think that's what they've done here. I think they wanted to appease people, but they also wanted to ensure that they can do what they need to do in the future. And
right.
so it's one of those things where like not a lot was said, but a lot was said at the same time. And I think that's, I guess that's what we should have expected here in the first place. Although, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. The point is, though, that, the actual statement was quite tame.
It was very tame.
It wasn't really anything that changes Xbox strategy at all. So the question from my perspective is, how did we get into this scenario where the three heads of Xbox have essentially had to come together to put together a 22-minute presentation to tell us all of this stuff, when it's essentially, right now at least, business as usual, and they could have said this like weeks ago, like literal weeks ago. It's baffling from my perspective.
At the same time, though, there's this benefit where, imagine if none of this was known and they suddenly come out and it's like, oh, Hi-Fi Rush is coming to PS5, Pentiment coming to the Switch. That would have created absolute chaos, because when Hi-Fi Rush was first rumored to come to Switch, people went nuts, right? And then things escalated from there. And the fact that it escalated so far and then it was sort of rolled back and it ended up not being what they expected kind of threw a little bit of water on the fire and calmed it down, if you will. And now it's like, oh, it's just those games, no big deal. So in a way, it kind of worked out for them PR wise. Like, it's still, this must have been a very difficult situation for them to deal with on the Xbox team, because you don't want this kind of unhappy customer base happening. But yeah, in the end, it kind of, I think it kind of just it calms them down for now, and they're basically saying, we're going to continue mostly business as usual, but we are looking at different things for the future. But the thing that I wonder, and you saw this, Phil mentioned at the beginning, like, oh yeah, when we originally envisioned this, we would have talked about the Activision Bethesda stuff first, which suggests that this sort of event thing, or this talk, was planned well in advance, and then those plans changed based on the reaction that people had to these leaks, right? How would this have been, like, what would they have done originally then? Because if you're just going to come out and say, yeah, 4 games are coming to these other consoles, and then not name them because they leave them up to the developer to reveal, out of the blue, that also creates confusion and chaos. Would they have mentioned them there? Like, I still don't fully understand what the original plan might have been for this sort of like situation. And that's why, you know what I mean? It's weird like that.
But the whole moving games to Switch, they've done it with like the Ori titles, Hellblade. It's not a big deal. It's the question of whether there's a trend towards more openly embracing multi-platform. And I think people are kind of upset by that. But the bottom line is that, as we shall discover when we discuss the Sony financial results next, it's basically the trend. It's the direction of travel. I suspect that Sony doesn't need to move its titles to Xbox, but it makes sense for Xbox to move titles to PlayStation simply by virtue of the fact that they have got this enormous market.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the situation right now is that games are becoming more expensive to make. They're taking longer to develop, and then the world economy and the state of the world is not exactly in a great space right now. And I think companies are trying to find ways to essentially make more money, right? And you might say, well, Microsoft, they're huge. They got to make money. That's what they're trying to do here. And Sony's the same. I mean, they're funding these hundreds of millions of dollars worth of games. And it doesn't feel sustainable when you look at those numbers and you think about how many they need to sell and what it looks like. Like, it seems like it's too much for Sony as well. And we'll get to the Sony stuff, but on the Microsoft side, I mean, I feel like they're just trying to find a way to strategically push into multi-platform, but doing it without ruffling feathers too much at a time. Because I understand why they would want to do this. Because of all these acquisitions now, they do stand to become one of the biggest game publishers in the world. They already are. They are. They absolutely are. They already are. And like, their aspirations clearly place them even beyond that. They want to take these studios that they have, leverage them, and make the most money back on these games. And you need these other platforms to do it, I think. I don't feel like the Xbox install base plus Game Pass is enough to support all these gigantic products they're funding. And that's why they're starting to play in this pool. And also, stuff like Activision, they've, as far as we know, at least, a lot of the big Activision stuff in the works, that's still being planned for multi-platform. I mean, as much as Sony was like begging them to keep Call of Duty on there, it would be stupid for them to not ship Call of Duty on all these platforms. They would be leaving a ton of money on the table for no reason, right? And that's not Microsoft's play, I think. But at the same time, they don't want to upset their customers. And I said last week, while I think there was a lot of overreactions, I still understand a bit. I mean, from the old days, at least, it's changed. I don't feel this way anymore. But like back in the day, I mean, there was a bit of this rivalry to it. You kind of felt like connected to your box. And I guess some people are still in that position today. I can see why they would be worried, frustrated, whatever. So I think, Phil, they're trying to massage the message to say, yeah, we're moving in this direction, but we're not just like diving in head first and like everything's over kind of thing. And they're also, they also made very sure to double down and say, look, Xbox hardware is continuing, which we'll talk about in a moment, but they're like, there is more hardware coming. We're committed to Xbox, but we're also exploring this multi-platform space. I think that's completely fair.
Alex, thoughts?
I wish they didn't have to do any sort of assuaging of fears of quote unquote ardent fans. I find it pathetic. I just don't even understand it. Like, the more people playing games that you love is commendable. Developers being able to put it on more platforms, as long as it's not like overly burdening them and making them reduce quality elsewhere, or causing to burn out and things like that. This sounds great. I love it. As long as there's no great technical hurdle to make this possible. Like, I shouldn't expect every game to go to Switch. Right. I shouldn't expect games that use specific input peripherals to work on all platforms, etc. But this all sounds great to me. And I wish they didn't have to do that for fear of losing the current install base to a degree. I wish that wasn't a thing at all. And I honestly don't know how big of a thing it is, because that there was a huge social media uproar about this in the period that we just talked about before, this 2 weeks or so, whatever before. But it's just all about these games, these 4 games which were not named, but they are going to be these things that were cross-plat.
Yeah, we know what they
are. Gen. We know what they are. They're like smaller, like these are just. This makes the most sense, and having larger install base for these games makes so much sense. Like, I just really don't get it, and I think it's awesome that they're going to start doing more multi-platform stuff. I just the only thing I'd possibly be slightly worried about for the future is just like, okay, so what is the purpose of buying an Xbox? And I think they could sell that more. They could sell that more as part of this discussion. Instead of starting assuaging the fans about the exclusives going away, talk about more what makes Xbox the best place to play these things.
I said it last week as well. I think the solution here is to slowly but surely make Xbox and PC become a singular platform. Find a way to leverage that. Make Windows.
Well, that's what they're doing, some might say, but they're doing PC ports, which they are plumbing into the PC ecosystem.
It's totally different.
And into Xbox. Is it though? Because
I think it is different. Because
you can load up Forza Horizon on Steam, and then you can play the same game with the same progression on your Xbox. It's pretty cool. What more do you want?
The Steam Deck.
Xbox playing PC games.
We want an Xbox
really
that can
great.
play PC games with the feature. Basically, the Steam Deck is like a console, but more open. And I think Microsoft is the only company in this space that can actually do that still. I think they could leverage Windows in a way to allow it to become a little more open, not all the way open, but more open, something like the Deck even, but really leverage the strength of Windows as a gaming platform, because, I know Valve is pushing for Linux, but Windows is still, that's where the games are, right? And I think if they're looking at this from like every screen is an Xbox, they should also consider other ways to get the software onto these boxes and like just open it up a little bit more. Still offer that concise, polished experience. make Windows more of a gaming OS, make that like Steam OS like interface. That's how you get all these different handhelds in there. That's how you get these new console boxes in there. Just leverage the fact that they're a PC company more in the console space, because when
isn't that what Phil's saying that he's going to do with handhelds? They're going to.
It sounds that way, right?
And I don't think they're going to put Xbox OS on PC. I think they're just going to try and make Windows more amenable to good handheld play.
I think their next console should be that as well. I think it should all be one style of device, a PC basically. Get rid of the dedicated box in there, because look, if you're getting rid of discs and physical media anyway, which they're gonna do, like, screw it, just get rid of the whole console concept and just turn it into a PC, because the PC is now at a point where that actually works and is a compelling reason. You want to sell Xboxes, I think that's the one way to do it. That's a differentiator that Nintendo and Sony won't match. You've got to make something that people really want, like a piece of hardware that's cool and has these types of features. You're like, whoa, you can do this on a console? I think that gets people talking again. And I think Valve has continued to prove this with the success of their Steam Deck hardware, is that people like this stuff. I mean, we've seen like even like Japanese support and everything, like that stuff's opening way more up on the PC side. The Steam Deck's popular over there. Like, they're breaking into these new markets. And I think Microsoft could really leverage that to create something new.
Well, you'd have to get them invested into the Xbox ecosystem. But if you have an open platform, what's to stop them just not going to Steam and all of that?
Who cares?
All of those 30%.
Sell their games on Steam.
Well, the point is that they would not be able to subsidize the handheld then, because the handheld subsidies are paid for by Xbox revenue.
I guess it's just like, then what makes the Xbox
I think
unique?
If they had, like, basically a new tier of hardware, I mean, let's say that they do make a PC handheld, but it is using Xbox OS, and there's like a new tier of hardware similar to the way there's S and X now, but there's a handheld tier, an H tier if you want, or an M tier for mobile, and it's like a new class of Xbox basically that developers have to target, which is similar to the capabilities of Steam Deck or Switch 2 or whatever. That would kind of make sense, and it would be a pretty cool device, and you might get some of the advantages or more of the advantages of that kind of bespoke approach to tailoring to a specific piece of hardware. So I'm going to be curious to see what they do on the handheld side. But I do think that there is a way forward to, well, they've discussed it. I mean, Windows handhelds at the moment have got problems. Windows is just not a great venue.
Not at all.
The Steam Deck has really just blown it away. It really is a fantastic piece of kit. I mean, obviously some might be saying that Valve, it's like happy days for Valve. They've got a console now. They've got the Xbox games. They're getting the PlayStation games. I can well imagine Satya looking at Valve and saying, well, why aren't we doing this?
Yeah. Although, Rich, let me ask this then. What if Valve decided to step more? What if the Steam Machine concept comes back, and this time they've already built this whole system with Steam Deck, and then they create a similar unified piece of hardware that's a console as well, and it runs the same OS and it works like Steam Deck, and those become a synergized platform, and now Steam is more of a console.
They tried it and it failed.
They tried it before it was ready. I think it's ready now. Things have changed a lot on Linux gaming and the Steam OS front because of the deck. Mm-hmm. It's not the same situation as it was when they tried before, right?
Yeah. I'm not convinced. I'll be honest with you.
I think they could do it. I think
that the PC market is an order of magnitude higher already, and they are the key player in that market. So they don't really stand to gain much. I mean, it's kind of crumbs from the table almost. I would say, compared to what they've already got.
So Rich, just really briefly, what do you think then in the future is, since we think this is like the first opening of a gate that'll become a deluge over time of all titles essentially being multi-platform? I think that's very reasonable. But like, then how do they differentiate Xbox in the future?
Well, that's a good question, because you're going to need a console to drive the subscriptions. You need a focus for it, because I don't think PC Games Pass has actually done the job that they thought it would do, which is to give them that mass exposure. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the Steam installed base is. I seem to recall a figure of something like 113 million users. I might be wrong there.
Yeah, it says 132 monthly active users on Steam.
Monthly active
That's a
users.
lot.
That's
a lot.
monthly
That's
active.
basically the whole lifetime sales of like PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
Right? And that's happening every month.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
I mean, that's basically what I think Microsoft would like to be, right?
They got to fix their interfaces first then.
There's a lot of work to do on Xbox for PC. I'm kind of sort of always surprised at how little traction there is there. But even so, I mean, they're doing a lot right. I mean, I love this idea of an ecosystem that, you know, with proper cross saves and whatnot, but not everybody on Game Pass buys into it, which is a bit problematic, I think. I think the whole challenge facing people like Sony, Microsoft, is that the total addressable market is not increasing, right? The total amount of users playing console games, Microsoft says it is, mind you, but, you know, is it? In terms of console sales, doesn't seem to be the case. So how do you access those wider markets? PC Game Pass, I'm not sure it's been as successful as Microsoft hoped. We've now got a figure of 34 million Game Pass subscribers, which includes Game Pass Core, which is basically, you know, the basic Xbox Live Gold. The target, I believe,
Game Pass Core, then, does that not include the actual access to games?
You get a collection of games, but not the full amount.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, you won't be playing like, you know, Forza Horizon 5 day one on Game Pass Core, right?
Wait, so that number seems a little bit lower than I'd expect then.
Well, they were looking, as I understand it, for 100 million users by 2030. And I think we can safely assume that's not going to happen. So, you know, where are you going to get this mass market penetration? And, you know, the whole concept seems to be mass market penetration because they're literally saying, you know, we want every screen to be an Xbox. Well, how do you do that? You know, and the answer is any viable device has to deliver the games, whether it's a PlayStation or a PC or what. And, you know, it looks as though we're slowly starting to move towards that goal. But understandably, there are baby steps happening with the PlayStation side of things. And this raises an interesting question, of course, which is the whole sort of fundamental issue people have had with this PlayStation multi-plat scenario, which is if I can play all of the PlayStation exclusives and I can play all of the Microsoft exclusives on one console, it would be a PlayStation, not an Xbox. That's problematic, certainly in terms of shifting your Game Pass subscriptions, right? Maybe the route forward is simply to have a defined strategy, which is that, you know, year, 18 months exclusivity on Xbox for those juggernaut titles. Maybe that's just the way to address it. I don't know.
And then it comes to the other platform at full price, $70, bam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, you know, even then, I think people would be possibly thinking, well, do I need to subscribe to Game Pass, you know, to play these games? Maybe I'm only interested in one or two, in which case, you know, you're not going to be saving a huge amount of money by going to Game Pass. I don't know. Maybe it's a really sort of, I mean, what I was kind of looking for was clarity in terms of what the future of Xbox is, and what we got was a snapshot of the immediate future as opposed to a defined strategy for the next 5 years or even the next 2 years.
I'm just trying to think how do they make Game Pass more exciting to people? Because thinking about it, when you just said, oh, saving money, it occurred to me that whenever people talk about Game Pass, it's always framed in this, like, it saves you so much money. It's always about value. I think value isn't that exciting in the world of gaming. It's good, it's important, but like people aren't like waking up in the morning and be like, man, I can't wait for some of that value. Like, I love this value I'm getting out of this. Like, that's not what drives the emotions in games. And I think it's not just having the games available there on day one. There's got to be something else to it. And I don't know what that could be, but something that makes people say, like, I really got to be on this service. This is awesome.
Well, the concept is the discoverability of great games that you might not have otherwise A, known about, or B, bought.
Cared about. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the joy of
messaging
Game Pass.
Thing then, yeah.
I think, though, that them making it more exciting on Game Pass isn't really a core issue, just because they've already sold apparently these 34 million Game Pass to an addressable part of the Xbox market, which is the only place where it really matters. PC is not, they don't have the market penetration there, apparently. So they've already sold the idea to the Xbox owners, and they can't bring it elsewhere. And I don't think Game Pass is the issue. I think they just need a larger market, and the Xbox market is small.
Well,
and I don't think they can make it any more enticing than it already
the
is.
addressable audience on Xbox is what it is because it's not getting as many people to want to purchase the Xbox. And I'm trying to think how do you get people?
Game Pass is the
maybe
reason
that's
why
not.
People aren't wanting to purchase the Xbox. I think it's a lot larger than that. I just think that the Xbox not selling well is the core of all this, and the market not being big enough to. I mean, I would love if they could somehow even make Game Pass even more special in some way. I don't think that's the core issue.
No, I know. It's just it's weird when you think about this stuff because I look back at like the Wii U and the Switch. Like Nintendo was fundamentally making the same types of games and experiences on the Wii U as that they would do on the Switch, but the Wii U was a gigantic failure. The Switch was not. And you think about all the things that changed between those. Obviously, the hardware plays a large role, but there's just something about. I mean, it really feels like the messaging, the face the company puts on, the way they put the hardware out there, the way they sell the features ended up being like the thing that did it. And that made it click in a way that it didn't for the Wii U, despite their actual software strategy not really changing it all that much, right? Nintendo on Wii U is the same as Nintendo on Switch, I would argue.
A lot of things changed, I think. First of all, they came up with a console concept that actually resonated with people.
The Wii U was like a half step towards that, right? Like it was kind of like
but it just didn't work. It wasn't a mobile system, and
not
that's
enough.
basically what I think sells it. You know, it's the fact it's a mobile system and it's got access to all of these games. But more to the point, they were kind of blessed with Switch in that people bought into the concept. And then there was no shortage of games to bring across because essentially the entire Wii U library, in addition to all of their new efforts, in addition to the fact that they brought together mobile and console gaming into one area, it basically, solved all of the issues, ticked all of the boxes, and it became something immensely desirable, right? So I think
that's what I feel Microsoft kind of somehow missed with the Xbox Series transition. Where like Xbox One, it was certainly not a Wii U. Let's not say that it was successful, but I feel like this was their opportunity, and it feels like a lot of little things went wrong maybe early on that prevented it from becoming as appealing. Like just one small thing, for instance. Like I still that they were setting up Halo Infinite to be a launch title. And if that had actually hit and been as good as everyone had hoped for right on launch day and only on Xbox Series X, no cross-platform stuff, like I genuinely think that would have made a huge difference in just getting the energy going on Xbox. It doesn't solve all the other issues behind the scenes and development timings and all that, or the pandemic situation, but I feel like they missed that springboard opportunity this gen to really get people going.
We'll talk about the new console, or the largest technical leap, in a moment. But first of all, let's talk about some supporter questions. This one from Richard, not me. It would be funny just to pose questions myself and then answer them, or ask you to answer them. I might do that at some point, actually.
Do with
this. Some great ones from you, Alex. Anyway, this one from Richard. What is your view on Microsoft allowing the rumor mill to go wild for over a week, only to tell us that 4 unnamed games are coming to PlayStation Switch, and that Starfield and Indiana are not amongst those? It felt like a very hollow and anticlimactic announcement. This feels like something they could and should have addressed in a tweet or press release, rather than allowing the press to run rampant with the story. Maybe Phil shouldn't have said they'd have more news at a later date, which made the story larger than it was. I do think there was definitely a communications issue here, right? Because the concept of, good but not exactly juggernaut games going to other systems, it's not something that's new. They've done it before, that it could have just been stamped out. I think the issue is, and maybe I'm completely wrong here, but maybe there were plans to accelerate the transition to other platforms more quickly. That leaked out and caused the meltdown. And maybe there was like a change of plans. Who knows? I mean, but it does seem very, very strange. And this is exactly a point put forth by Miss B and Crap and Shits. I think we know where that was going. Did Microsoft backtrack due to the rumor backlash, or are they just amazingly incompetent at communication, letting the rumor fire burn uncontrolled?
Rumor fire.
The rumor fire,
That's
I
great.
do think, could have been quenched a lot sooner if this was the plan from the get-go, right? Why sit back and watch this, happen? It's just a bit baffling. Ishrak says, not a question, just that it's extremely rogue for Microsoft to make such a huge announcement on its podcast. I'm not sure I'd say it's a huge announcement. It was just, I think they were struggling to find a venue to actually get the point across in a way that isn't making an announcement. I mean, there wasn't much in the way of announcements. It was just kind of like a pleasant chat, a pleasant Q&A session.
I was about to say, PlayStation does these things with just like a really kind of boring blog.
Yeah, the PlayStation
the
blog.
the PlayStation, the PC version, that's a blog.
Stupid
like,
blog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There is, things
great.
just drop on the PlayStation blog, and it's like, okay, let's get on with it.
Yeah,
There's
what the heck?
no drama.
It's so awkward.
It's just like a drama-free zone. It's quite refreshing. One thing I am going to say in counter to that, though, is after this podcast, Phil actually did interviews. And this is what I think is a defining separating factor between Microsoft and PlayStation PR, which is that there's never any ability to question anything that comes from Sony because they don't put the execs out, or only very rarely put the execs out for interview. And in the wake of this, we had journalists questioning Phil about all of this stuff, and that's the way it should be. So I do want to give Phil kudos for that.
I bet, Rich, that it all stems from that famous Jim Ryan interview where he said, like, who would want to play those old retro games or whatever. Because that thing that has continued to come up time and time
absolutely.
again.
Sony has got an iron tight grip.
They're like,
on the
nope, we're
narrative.
not doing that anymore.
Final question from Mevlud Sabashvili. Excuse me if I've got the pronunciation wrong there. I usually do. Hi DF! What do you think of a simple solution to Microsoft's problems? Just buy PlayStation. This way we will get the best services and the best first-party titles. Also, Microsoft will get dominant console platform and PlayStation won't have to drag Sony along. Everybody wins! Yeah, I can just imagine, basically the hoops that Microsoft had to jump through to acquire Activision Blizzard King, the court cases, the gigantic amount of money that was spent, and it's just not going to happen again, is it? I mean, this would be a fundamental challenge to competition, and it would just never happen.
Also, yeah, a big American company acquiring a large chunk of a Japanese company like that, just no way. Not going to happen. Not like that.
It's happened in the automotive business, though, right?
Yeah, to varying levels of
but
success.
only when the industry was in absolute free fall and there was no other way forward.
Yeah, pretty much. And hey, maybe that'll happen here. I don't know.
Well, I don't think so. I think, the numbers are fine. It's just there's this pursuit for growth, right? As opposed
Infinite
to
growth.
just being okay with being sustainable and profitable. Yeah, there was that horrible statement this week from the Embracer Group about how they're all in on shareholder value.
They said the quiet part loud.
Yeah.
I mean, that is business, right? But still.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to the final part of the podcast, which was essentially this announcement of new hardware, and we're going to learn more at the holiday season. So possibly like the VGAs or something. I do expect that we're probably going to get those refresh versions of the Xbox consoles, the new Series S, and possibly the adorable digital Series X. Simply because they've done the die shrinks. Obviously, they've moved to 6 nanometer. And they're going to make new hardware based on that. But what they're talking about here is potentially something more exciting. Now, there is the idea of an Xbox handheld, but they're also talking about the next console being the largest technical leap you will have ever seen. I've got to actually check that source because I'm struggling to think of a technical leap that would eclipse like the PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
I think that would be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, though, my issue with a statement like that is that it's not really about the hardware anymore. It's about the software. And if you, no matter what the hardware leap is, like developers need to leverage it to, and I think we truly are in an age of diminishing returns. We know what developers are working on and such, and not specifically, but have an idea of like where rendering is at. And yeah, there can be some major improvements and things, but I think it's not gonna feel like that same kind of leap just because of where we're at the moment. And just making games at that level, it just takes so much time and money to do it. How are you gonna, I just don't think we're gonna be able to have a console launch again where what you see on the screen looks like miles beyond anything that you could have seen on previous generation machines. I think it's more of a human limitation than anything else at this point.
What do you think about this, Alex?
I think it's interesting that they said that, based on the whole rumors, rumors, completely wrong, the FTC leak, of how they're targeting things like a neural processing unit, maybe switching to ARM for their next gen console. I honestly do think the AI touch could lead to some transformative things for games and games visuals, as we've seen on the PC platform. It's just a matter, and it's going so quickly. This whole like Sora thing that just launched yesterday, I think it looks ridiculous. I was always laughing about how temporally unstable AI stuff is, just like, and this was it's actually stable frame per frame. I mean, it's got issues still, and I can see them, but I think that's very, very interesting. I don't know how you work those into games in the immediate future, but in 5 years, I think a platform that leverages AI in some interesting way could lead to some transformative experiences, and maybe that's what they're talking about, or maybe they're talking about something else, and I don't have a good grip on that exactly right now. But I think that's exciting. I think they needed to talk about the next gen plans, even just sprinkle it in here. I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, like, just like the carrot and the stick, like the stick is the multi-platform thing and the carrot's like, but look at our next gen console. But yeah, so I think that's great. I've said it before in the past, though, based upon all the things that they said in the FTC leak, frame generation, AI upscaling, NPU, and apparently Windows is going to have some sort of AI upscaling thing going in the future, which I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work. I think going with Nvidia for next gen would actually be an interesting differentiating factor, yeah. because the Series X and the PS5, like the things that Series X does better than PS5 in the games we've seen so far, it's like been like slightly higher dynamic res, which is practically invisible, to be honest with you. And then like there's the occasional performance advantages, which have been nice. Like I guess in like, I don't know, Alan Wake 2 was pretty noticeable there, but that's not nearly as exciting as we have an entirely different GPU. We have an entirely different CPU architecture. The stuff that made PS2, Xbox to a certain degree, also like PS3, Xbox 360 so interesting from a technical aspect. So I'm hoping that it's that.
Yeah, I mean, how do you do the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation? If you look at like Xbox One to Xbox One X, you essentially went from a 1.4 teraflop machine to a 6 teraflop machine. And, that actually translated in some games to like, an actual 9 times increase in resolution. Plus, there would have been performance advantages as well. The Xbox One X really was, a pretty phenomenal leap there within the same generation. And I can't see how they're going to do that going from Series X to whatever it is that comes next. So I think we possibly need to divorce ourselves from the concept that we're going to have a GPU that's going to deliver 5 times the performance or whatever, 8 times the performance, whatever this bar is for the largest technical leap, and basically just go back to the FTC document, which is what essentially outlined what Nvidia is doing now, which is neural upscaling, frame generation. I mean, it is to the point now where, on these 4K experiences on a 4090, it's, an eighth of the pixels are actually being natively generated. And that is where you get your technological leap. And it will be tangible and it will look different. But just on the hardware level, there are diminishing returns now. And obviously the future is stuff like AI, right? And frame generation.
Yeah. So just one little thing I just thought about when you said that, and I think the hardware limitations for general compute are completely there, but I think, and I agree with that, I just think like instead we use that die space for something else, and the AI stuff comes in that, where you can actually get a much larger than like an 8x multiplier with specialized hardware for certain tasks.
Yeah.
Sony does it right now with, and Microsoft does too, with the decompression blocks on their consoles. Right. And that is a force multiplier for that one little specific task. I mean, it's been kind of like not so interesting this generation for every game. It's actually kind of boring, but I think for other things, it's like in the future with this AI stuff, I think that's maybe what they could reference back and say like, haha, it's actually like 50 times better than the Xbox Series X at AI. So they could do that.
Yeah, we've not really had too many AI applications on any of the consoles. I mean, the Series X does have those extensions.
Right.
But we haven't really seen any use of it, perhaps because they aren't there on PlayStation. Yeah, it's tricky. I'd love to see. Well, the other thing, of course, which we were which was in that FTC document, was the mooted move to ARM, which opens up another interesting point for discussion, which is that it looked to me like Microsoft was doubling down on its backcompat library and the concept that it is persistent across the generations, which means that either they stick with AMD and x86 and just sort of reap the benefits as they did with Xbox Series consoles, or they move to ARM, possibly move to Nvidia, and then they have to, go through the whole procedure of making backcompat viable again, which I think would be a fascinating challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It would be fascinating.
I'm sure they could do it.
It would be cool.
I mean, some might say that Apple has done it,
Apple's done this translation, and Oliver's covered it. I think it's fascinating. I think it's extremely fascinating, the things that have come out there. The performance isn't there always, but maybe Microsoft being behind it and gaming the entire purpose of the platform. Maybe it's possible.
They made x86 run PowerPC code. That's quite a big achievement in itself.
They already did that. That's very true.
So I guess that also opens the question of what's coming next in terms of this two-tier strategy we had with Series S and Series X, right? I mean, how could that persist if you're producing the greatest hardware generational leap of all time? Maybe the solution is simply that you do have this sort of top-tier console, but then you also have like your handheld tier. So it would be kind of a bit more of an extreme push than the Series X, Series S differential. But it'd
be very interesting.
That would make the S class a lot more interesting, though, right? Compared to Series S, I think, if it's a handheld versus, obviously there'd be a huge gap there, but that's more compelling market-wise.
Yeah,
even bigger price gap too, so they could pump up that Series X successor to be something even bigger.
If it's a dedicated handheld versus just a console, though, that's a lot the extra parts. The screen, the button, the
battery, etc.
You obviously have buttons in the controller, but the battery, screen, everything like that does add to the cost. So I don't know though. I think Series S becoming a handheld, that class of console becoming a handheld makes it way more exciting and a lot more. You could be a lot more forgiving of its faults when it's a handheld.
Right. You would also be asking a lot of developers who are already struggling with Series S, right? But at the same time, one might assume that they're going to be producing PC versions which have to scale across.
Got to scale it on PC.
Yeah, a very wide range of platforms there.
It's got to scale down to the RTX 3050, 6 gigabyte rich, right?
Yeah.
That glorious GPU.
Or the Radeon 7. Got to run on the Radeon 7.
You'll see that my Radeon 7 is now back on its stand at the back there. Because it doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. But maybe we'll be able to rectify that soon.
Yes, we'll see.
I know you really want to see The Last of Us Part 1.
I want to see it.
Radeon 7.
Absolutely.
So do I, actually.
Yeah, we all do. We're waiting.
Everyone
That's
does.
going to be a special episode.
Any more to talk about with Microsoft here before we crack on? I mean, I'm not entirely sure I've learned anything new except that they're committed to hardware, but they need hardware to drive Game Pass. So it's, it was a given that they were going to be on Gen 10 consoles anyway.
It was a given, but people were really freaking out, like, oh, they're leaving the console industry. And I'm happy that they officially basically confirmed, no, they're staying around. They're still producing hardware. I think that's great.
And, the idea of an Xbox handheld, I do find it quite compelling, even if it's not as open as you would want there, John.
Even if it's more locked down, I'd still be way into it.
I mean, consider the PlayStation Vita. It's actually quite underpowered compared to even mobile chips of its generation, but it delivered some awesome games simply because it was a dedicated platform that, developers had to target.
And now it's fully unlocked and wide open, baby. You can do whatever you want on the Vita.
Fair enough.
Gosh.
Okay.
Is this illegal? You're talking about illegal
It might
things?
be. I don't know.
It's not illegal, just by the way. Okay.
It's not.
I really am going to be curious to see how they follow up on this. And obviously, we're going to be taking a look at whatever sort of multi-platform games Microsoft come up with. But with that, let's move on to our next news topic. Okay, so earlier in the week, Sony made its latest financial statement. And typically, usually they're quite anodyne things. You don't really learn too much. You get a small insight into what's happening in the corporate world. But this time there are sort of a range of alarming statements or fascinating statements, depending on how you want to look at it. I would say it's probably alarming because there's the report now that in the wake of this financial statement, Sony's shares dropped more than they have in the last 2 years. So obviously there was a certain degree of negative reaction to this. But I guess the thing that stands out the most is that we're kind of, 3.5 years now into the current console generation. PlayStation 5 has been around that long. And Sony is actually predicting that sales have peaked. And we're now in the quote-unquote latter stages of the console generation. Now, typically, if a console generation lasts 7 years, we're kind of now at the midpoint, even though it doesn't really feel like it.
No.
And obviously, there was a lot of discussion about what they're going to do about it. And one of those strategies is to be much more aggressive with their PC releases. There was also the other statement that none of their franchise series are going to have any kind of sequels appearing until at least April 2025. John, where do you want to start with this? There's a lot to unpick here. What about this concept that we are at the latter stages of the PlayStation 5 generation?
I mean, I think if we assume a 7-year kind of cycle, then yeah, it makes sense. We're moving into the latter half. I don't think they're saying, a lot of people interpreted this as like, oh, it's over, or like we're at the end. But no, they're just saying the latter half. And I think it's pretty obvious when you think about the business perspective. We're in the halfway point basically, and now everything from here. It's not downhill specifically, but we're now heading towards the end of life in the next 3 to 4 years.
Right,
and I think that's completely normal.
Is it though? I mean, if you go back and look at prior console generations, what would Sony do in that particular time? What they would do is cost reduce the console, make it cheaper, and then get a critical mass of more players involved, right? But what we're finding here is that they've actually announced that they've got a cost reduced version of the PlayStation 5, but the parts to make it have increased in cost, which have eliminated the idea that they can actually sell them in that kind of mass market way they've done in previous generations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is actually the problem they're facing in terms of that. I think that timing wise, it's really similar to prior generations, at least the last 2 generations. But yes, they seem to be struggling to reduce the cost of making these machines due to parts prices, which does sort of take away that mass market sort of fervor, right? Because when you were starting to sell PS2s, I don't know, they hit like $149 or something. I can't remember the order of the price drops, but as they dropped in price, you get more and more people jumping on board. And right now it's still a $500 machine. I guess technically that was is the digital. Did they increase? Actually, I forget. They
increased the price on the digital, but I think the point is that in sales periods, we have seen the disc PlayStation 4 reach prices as low as $400. But I
Right.
think the point possibly being raised is that is the ceiling. They can't go
Lower
any
than that.
lower than that. That is as far as they can push it.
That's troublesome for a lot of reasons beyond just the PlayStation. I think that the fact that we've reached this point where this sort of cost reduction no longer seems feasible.
To be fair, John, we had warning of this way back in 2020.
Yeah, they
when
told
we
us
sat
right at
down.
Microsoft,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they just basically said, we can't cost produce the Xbox Series X.
Yep.
This is the only way we can produce a $299 console is to make the Series S. And why wait if we can do it now? And
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
They were completely correct on that.
I guess the reason why I reacted to this in a slightly negative way due to the wording was because software-wise, it doesn't feel like we're at the over the hump
Nope.
going downhill. I just think of like the Xbox 360 or generation where the first 3 years of the PS3 and Xbox 360, they're obviously, they didn't start at the exact same time, but the amount of kind of genre defining games that came out during that time period, iconic things, you have your Uncharted 2s, your Demon Souls, you have Gears of War, you have Halo 3, I don't know, Oblivion.
yeah, I think your point is they're not really happening.
They're just not happening. And
Yep.
so it didn't feel like and those were next gen exclusive games or current gen exclusive games at that time point. And so we haven't I've really enjoyed Returnal. I talked about this yesterday on Slack. I was like, man, Sony got Returnal out of this.
That's really good. That's probably that's
it's like their best
Yeah.
game they've made, I think, this
oh my
generation.
god, yeah.
And it's like, ooh, it's like that, but there's like the rest of them are like cross-gen stuff.
I still think the Demon Souls remake is
re-releases
really
of old
good.
games.
It's a remake, but it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, but I guess that's why it's not totally something.
Well,
new
did you
and,
play? Did you
not
ever
see.
play Demon Souls, the original, through?
I've played it on RPCS3. Yes,
through?
Yeah. No, I didn't get past the Mind Flayer place.
Oh god, the Mind Flayer. Ooh.
The Mind Flayer. Did I say
Yes,
that
you did.
correctly?
Flayer. The Flayer.
Yeah. No, I haven't beaten it, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I feel like the interesting
No, I agree.
current gen exclusive games, and I'm not talking about platform exclusives, just current gen exclusive games hasn't been there so far this generation, and it's been a little bit uneventful, especially those first 2 years.
I mean,
other than Returnal.
I think the problem is twofold there, or multiple fold. Obviously, games take more time to develop. They're costing more, thus they want to retain that previous generation install base, hence cross-gen. There was the pandemic as well, which I think further slowed things down. And you take all of these things together, and it's like the console cycle is trying to operate as normal, but we've reached a point where developers just can't make the stuff fast enough. And they also don't necessarily want to commit that specifically to hardware where the install base is still lower. Which is why I think cross-gen lasted so long, because when games are this expensive to make and take this long, why would you want to limit your audience? Because technologically, with the way games scale these days, with the way engines scale these days, it certainly isn't difficult to, there's challenges, but scaling down to last gen machines isn't that insane anymore. It used to be. If you were using any of the new, like, you're not going to do all the stuff that we saw on like a 360 on a PS2, for instance, right? It was not possible to do it. Like, it couldn't be done. And as a result, you didn't see much of that. When we went from PS3 to PS4, there was actually a pretty big cross-gen period as well. Less so, but it still existed. But because those were also somewhat different hardware, the last-gen versions were often like genuinely terrible. Like borderline unplayable, shouldn't have been sold. I'm looking at you, Shadow of Mordor. You should not have been made. It was terrible. But now, especially with PCs and needing to scale down to lower end PCs, the popularity of the Switch, and just the way engines work, it's so scalable. It's like, I'm sure developers are like, why would we even bother not shipping a last gen version in most cases, unless there's a financial incentive to not do that.
We finally
Yeah,
reached the end of
interesting.
cross-gen, really, right?
We've just
Starting
reached
to see-
it, really.
We've
Yeah.
yeah, it's taken like 3 and a bit years to get there. But yeah, the strategy from Sony seems to be to accelerate the PC side of the business, which I think is a really good idea. The question is how, similar to the whole enraging fanboys on the Microsoft side, how they do that on the PC on the PlayStation side, because even their existing strategy has enraged some people. I honestly think that it is a bubble within certain
Probably,
communities
yeah.
on Twitter. I don't think too many people care otherwise. But, we've just seen this week with the release of Helldivers 2, which was a cross-platform day-and-day release on PlayStation 5 and PC, that it's actually turned out rather well.
It's turned out it's their best
Their
release
best,
game
yeah.
ever
Steam,
or something.
yeah. This is the biggest Steam game.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the issue that they've had with their existing Steam strategy is that, Horizon Zero Dawn came out. It shifted millions of copies on PC years after it arrived on PlayStation. I think there was a certain degree of interest in seeing what a PlayStation game looked like on PC, but there does seem to have been diminishing returns on sales of other sort of story-driven first-party conversions since then. And I think maybe the concept of waiting, 18 months, 2 years to play these games on PC is not going down particularly well as a great strategy. They're leaving money on the table.
I agree. I think they could make a lot of money if they were there day and date on the PC.
Especially at full price.
Full
It's
price,
always the
like,
thing. Like,
holy moly.
like, why am I 2-year-old game full price? That seems weird.
I mean, obviously the challenge there would be on the back end in terms of with the way they're structured. Their teams making these games are focusing on the console versions, so that would mean you need to have like Nixies or whoever else working alongside them as the game's being made, which we know that does add some challenge to it, obviously. Because a lot of their teams are still working with proprietary tech, right? It's not like Unreal Engine here most of the time. So there is still that, but I think they should try to do it. I know it would ruffle feathers, but I think they would make a lot of money doing that. It's good. It's good for everyone. PC gamers would benefit a lot as well. I know Alex is thinking like, yeah, definitely. This is the strategy. Screw those fanboys. Bring it to PC, baby.
I mean, I guess there's some of the games I wouldn't be so interested in, and I haven't been interested in. I just cover them because I'm interested in the technological story. But like other ones, like I really wish Returnal was there, like back in the day, like when it came out. I don't know how well that sold.
Such a good game.
But I really wish it got the audience. I feel like it was a PC almost kind of game
In a way.
and it was in a lot of ways. Yeah, I would be excited to see this occur. And I think it's a great way for them to grow the market for themselves. Just like with Xbox, there's just who's buying PS5s? Is it people who already owned a PS4 in the past? That means you're not really growing. You're just like transitioning to new hardware and selling the same games again. So I think this would be a great way to get people playing more PlayStation games. I'm just curious, like how they would do it. I haven't been like, I think the Nixies produced stuff is generally pretty great, but I think almost everything else has been generally really bad at launch.
Quite.
So like Sackboy.
Helldivers 2 is fine though, right? Like it's missing some features.
Helldivers 2 is actually it's good. I'd actually say it's more polished than I saw with Ratchet and Clank at launch. Just because like when we played Ratchet and Clank at launch, like textures weren't loading
issues,
and stuff like that, and there was issues like that. Like Helldivers 2 launched, other than the server situation, which I don't think they could have forecast that the game would be so stupidly successful. So I think that's the main issue right now with the game. Helldivers 2 is really good. I would just like to see them up their quality if they're going to expect like full day and date prices for these games, because the quality has been pretty uneven.
Yeah.
And
even the Nixie stuff required time to get right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's yeah. So they obviously need more hands on deck or more time. It doesn't need to be day and date, but if it's like 3 months later or 4 months later or whatever, that's awesome.
That would be fine.
No one cares.
Actually, maybe that's a good strategy then.
Yeah, maybe.
What about a year? I mean, we were talking earlier about Xbox games coming to PlayStation in maybe a year. I mean, is that a year too long in this scenario? I think the issue here is that, I don't know, it becomes another sort of marketing beat if it's closer to the launch. You know, it actually reignites interest in all versions of the game.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I mean, there is also the story that there aren't going to be any of these mega franchise story-driven games happening until at least April 2025. But I think, again, this may have been misconstrued as, you know, okay, we haven't got God of War, The Last of Us, or, you know, one of those huge Horizon-level games, but we've still got games. There was the rumor that there's going to be an Astrobot title coming at some point this year.
I hope that's so true.
Yeah,
that would be the most exciting thing they've done this entire generation, alongside Returnal. I would say is that the Astrobot thing included with PS5 is amazing as is. The VR game is, I think it's the best thing that ever existed on PSVR, and still one of the best VR games ever made. Like, these guys are really good. They're really good. So if they've been given the budget to do a full game at that level, for all systems, not VR necessarily, it could be something special.
Well, it kind of leads us into this question from Dissector. Could all the doom at PlayStation and Xbox perhaps lead to more AA experiences like the excellent RoboCop Rogue City? The success of Nintendo with smaller, Tears of the Kingdom single-player experiences would suggest there is a market for games that aren't colossal open-world time sinks. This should hopefully enable more games to actually come out and decrease the albatross of risk hanging on the neck of every single release. I think we'd be kind of broadly in favour of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would love to see. That's what I've been talking about. Yeah, that's what they used to do. That's what was great about PlayStation, and is no longer really great about them today. That's what the whole focus was this whole range of titles, from the quirky stuff to single, double, triple A, all kinds of stuff across the board. You got it all. And now it's like, not that. Lots of sad dads and open worlds.
Third person games. You like?
I do actually like. I mean, I like the games still. Don't get me wrong. I think they're still making great games. It's just I want to see more variety and more stuff and smaller scale.
What do you think of the PS5 Pro? Do you think it's still happening? Because there's obviously no mention of it as an idea of, you know, to extend the generation and to prop up sales.
I would think but we'll see.
I guess the one thing that you just talked about earlier, how they have the parts to make a size reduced PlayStation 5, but the cost of it would be too much. They couldn't make money off of it, so there's no point in bringing it out. That implies that the PlayStation 5 can't be cost reduced. So if there is a theoretical PS5 Pro, it's going to be more expensive to buy
I think we've been
for a
saying
consumer than whatever
really.
PS5. Yep. Yeah. So I guess the question is, like, how much more expensive at that point? And I guess it's still, people said, like, what was it, November 2024?
Yeah, that's the mooted release date.
The mooted.
It's coming out in the summer, baby.
So,
let's get ready.
July. But not talking about it already. Yeah, maybe it's the thing where they're going to do some sort of there's no E3 anymore. What am I talking about? There's going to be some sort of not Games Fest in June or
There's
May.
There's an IGN one happening now.
About it then.
Yep.
It's going to be IGN versus Jeff. The gloves
goodness,
are off.
Yeah. I do like the idea of a not Games Fest, though. IGN versus Jeff versus not Games Fest.
Yeah, so they'll talk about that in the future, I guess, then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of interested now because obviously Microsoft are saying they've got this largest technical leap of all time. And I honestly thought that we're going to be looking at a transition away from console generations and back to the sort of iterative model that we kind of see in smartphones, but probably not that extreme. A new console every 3 or 4 years, and then, you know, the last two remain viable, if you see what I mean. Continual cross.
Yeah.
Maybe what they really mean is just like, we're going all in on PC. It's like, you see this 4090 or whatever, you know, it's like, you got this, you put
this is an Xbox.
This is the new Xbox, baby.
Slap an Xbox on like a sticker.
Yeah, that's right.
Decal.
They have like a PC, they rotate it around and then slap a sticker on that bad boy. And it's like, now it's an Xbox, most powerful in the world.
Oh, that'd be sick. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd pay money
They
to
should
see
sell a
people do
PC
that.
case in the shape of that original Xbox prototype, the big X, the big metal
Do it.
X.
Oh god.
I've got no idea how
Yeah.
you would actually put your components in it, mind you. Unless it's extremely large.
Well, it was.
Extremely.
I mean,
yeah,
more than
it's the
that.
size of like a coffee table.
You'd probably do
isn't
like
it?
a mini
Yeah.
ITX version. I don't know what you'd put in. That would like sit into one of the quadrants of the X.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
your GPU in another, power supply in
In
another.
another, yeah. Each quadrant is a
Yeah.
chunk.
And the fourth,
Yeah, the
the
motherboard's
fourth one is a
3D.
cooler, literally just for drinks and stuff.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
dear.
Wait,
Okay,
they did the Xbox Series X fridge, but I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
like, what if the adorably digital one? It looks more like circular.
Trash can.
It's like, yeah, exactly. They actually make a trash can because
They did the toaster
Apple
too
did
for the
Apple
Series
did
S,
the
didn't
trash
they?
can Mac, and
I was about to
but
say
they
they
never
could
actually
have the adorably all digital Mac Pro.
yes.
Anyway, I think that's all we got to say about that at the moment. But obviously, we'll be following up on that if and when developments happen. Let's move on to our next topic. So we're kind of out of news stories, but from a personal perspective, I've got news. I have now, it literally says on the docket here, Rich, quote unquote, downgrades from 8K to 4K. And it's true.
You downgraded.
I did. I downgraded. In my living room, I had an 8K TV, 75-inch. It was supplied by LG back in the day in 2020. We wanted to do a video about HDMI 2.1 and all of the various factors it had, and 8K was one of them. So 8K was the screen that LG supplied. However, now I am at a 77-inch OLED LG C1. And the route as to why that happened is kind of roots back to something you were saying on Twitter, John,
yes.
where you were looking at Artings and you were talking about the durability of LCD panels, right? And the fact that there's a lot of issues with LCDs that seem to crop up over time. And that's exactly what happened with the LG Nano cell screen I had, which is that I'll try and give some photos to Oliver here. They're pretty guerrilla. These were literally just screenshots, photos I took to send to repair centers to say, can you fix this screen? But essentially what happened is that one day the screen just turned itself off and I couldn't turn it back on again. And then I think maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, I could turn it on again. Everything seemed fine, except the left half of the screen was now significantly dimmer than the right half. And it was really kind of, it's just sort of got progressively more annoying. It's only really on bright content that you notice the difference. So, general stuff. If it's pretty dim, it looks the same. But, as soon as you have like the sky or a bright news set, it just looks pretty bad. Or The Simpsons, as is the case in the examples here that I used to show the problem. And the bottom line is that the machine, the display was out of warranty. LG couldn't help me. They suggested some repair shops. I contacted them. Some of them didn't reply at all, but one said, okay, this looks like a problem with the open cell. I'm not sure what that means. They asked to see the exact model number and serial number, which I gave them. And they basically said they couldn't source the part. And so, basically I'm left with this TV that I couldn't actually fix. And just got progressively more annoying over time. So Facebook Marketplace to the rescue again. We'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, essentially, there was a guy about 20 miles away who was selling an LG C1 in pretty much perfect condition for about £1,300, which is what I paid for my 48-inch CX. Right. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to get a better deal than that. I had to pay a man in a van like £100 to move it, but I'm still quids in versus like the cost on eBay. And, LG 77-inch 4K, and I'm very, very happy with it. It is better than the Nano cell. It doesn't really, no real surprises there. OLED betters LCD. HDR is much better. Contrast is much better. Viewing angle is much better. It's 2 inches bigger on the diagonal, although the screen weirdly seems to be lighter and smaller than the 75-inch LCD. I can't quite get my head around that. And that's where we are at the moment. And I have indeed downgraded from 8K to 4K, but the point is that there's been no 8K content in the 3.5 years since I've had that screen, apart from when I plug in a PC, which I don't tend to do in my living room. So, the downgrade is a net win.
It's always a net win. 8K was silly from the moment they announced it. But when they slapped it on the side of that PlayStation 5 box, I'm still waiting for it, Sony. That firmware that unlocks the true 8K potential.
How did they get away with that? I don't understand. It's like on the box.
I don't know.
They never actually supported it.
Well, what I can say, and I've said it in the past, is that when you do actually have gaming content at 8K on a living room display of that size, but you're like several meters back, or even like pretty much just in front of it, I actually think what it presents as is a superior form of anti-aliasing, but not a game-changing effect that you would expect from 32 million pixels per frame versus 8 million.
Jesus.
But there have been some interesting questions about my purchase from supporters. Let's start with, it seems to be all about Facebook Marketplace, not the screen as such.
Okay.
Ishrak says, how much is Rich getting paid to endorse Facebook Marketplace? What can I say? It's become my my sort of go-to place for picking up stuff on the cheap.
You've gotten stuff for me there too.
I've gotten stuff for you and Alex, which I still need to deliver in person. But we got this question from Dissector that, Rich, in your quest on Facebook Marketplace, how many bizarre quote-unquote headless photos of prom dresses or last season's Primark miniskirts did you have to click through?
That's so true.
So you say it's true, right? But the more you look at Facebook Marketplace and the more searches that you put in, sort of
the
stuff that, the algorithm adapts to service your particular needs, which is how this item came up in the first place. I wasn't searching for a 77-inch OLED. It just knew that I wanted one. So let's have a quick look at what Facebook is actually recommending to me at the moment.
Well, let's see.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Take a screen of that.
We've got, let's take a look here. We've got a mixed selection of Sega consoles, including a multi-mega, John.
Oh,
yep.
Wow.
I mean, he's got like Genesis. He's got a whole bunch of Genesis games. He's got a Mega Drive 2. He's got, looks like the Japanese Mega Drive there. Okay, let's go back to see what else we've got here. This is the thing that really annoys me. You get these embedded adverts that look like Facebook Marketplace ads, but actually just take you back to TeamU or whatever. HP Omen monitor. What else we got here? A whole bunch of graphics cards. This is quite interesting. A 1998 Porsche Boxster. But the point is that I am getting C64 Mini, which is nice. Titan 6GB, £50. I mean,
nice.
If I didn't already have one, I'd probably be buying that.
The first one on my list here, it's a 2017 Mercedes-Benz AMG GTS for $105,000. Knows my taste.
It knows your budget as well, seemingly.
Clearly.
Just looking through this Nespresso capsules. Yes, I do get some of those on Facebook Marketplace because they're a lot cheaper. PlayStation Portal, £190. Interesting just to see how they're keeping their value on the second-hand market. Big bunch of PC stuff here. A Dreamcast, Xbox Series S. I guess it's still sort of responding to my quest for the sub
120 euros for an Asus ROG Phone 2.
Yeah, you see. It definitely knows me. It's like Sony mini disc player here.
It knows.
What? Yeah,
I
it
want
has
that.
become one.
I love mini discs.
Let's take a look at this. Acorn Electron Computer and Games.
Oh yeah, I know.
So it is basically like eBay but curated and typically a lot cheaper than eBay. That's kind of why I'm into Facebook Marketplace. This question from Perfect Organism. I'm so curious how you paid for a 2,000-3,000 TV on Facebook Marketplace. Well, it's 1,300, but less the technicalities of it and more the emotional aspect of it. Did you take cash and risk a mugging? Did you
a mugging?
Did you YOLO a bank transfer? Was it a daring friends and family PayPal transaction? Well, typically when you actually make contact with people, you kind of get an idea of whether they're trustworthy or not. And typically, if somebody gives you their home address, I think it's pretty much kosher. You typically also see things that are obvious fakes as well. Like, there seems to be a weird thing where everything you possibly could want, like high-end Apple equipment, is like £84 or some other ridiculously low, somewhat arbitrary amount.
Not real.
So you kind of get an idea. I did pay for this with bank transfer, by the way, but after I'd been to the guy's place and seen the TV and had a go at it, make sure it was fine. And it helped that he was actually somebody that knew about Digital Foundry and knew who I was.
Oh, right. That's great.
Which has happened a few times now.
Yeah, I've had that. Gosh, this almost makes me nostalgic when I was building my CRT Armada here, driving around Germany and like just going to random houses to pick up CRTs. It was a good time.
Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly what my experience is. And yeah, I've bought a big bunch of stuff on Facebook Marketplace now, and I have to deliver it to you guys because, I've got you a Naomi and a Naomi 2 arcade board at this point, John.
Yes.
Numerous motherboards for you, Alex. So,
oh my goodness, I'm excited.
But that's my
I
news.
need more motherboards.
I've downgraded. The funny thing is, of course, that there are now 8K to 4K downscalers, which I expect would actually make 8K content look pretty much exactly the same, probably better on the OLED because of the better contrast ratio and whatnot. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm really, really happy with a 77-inch LG C1, and it's got the decent black frame insertion as well, John.
That's true. Oh man! Oh,
the actually good one. The C1's the last one, right?
It's the last one with the 120 hertz BFI. They got rid of it after that.
Yeah, the guy I bought it off had actually upgraded to a new 65-inch Sony OLED, which he says is the best TV apparently out right now.
Sony's OLEDs are real good. That's for sure. They do make great OLEDs. Absolutely. Samsung does too now, but I feel like all those. I need to say. Sony might have the same issue. Basically, with the QD OLEDs that I've seen, at least, the way they treat the screen, like it's like the screen treatment means that if you're in a light room, the screen sort of physically reflects light back, making it look lighter. So it doesn't look completely black. Like if you're in a dark room, it's still perfectly black like OLED, but the material doesn't look completely black when you're in a lit room, which actually kind of washes out some of the contrast a little bit. It's very weird. I don't know why they do that, and hopefully that changes. And maybe it will in the new generation.
Okay, cool. I guess that's all I've got to say about my TV.
That's cool.
I'm quite happy about it. There it is.
I want to get a 77-inch as well at some point.
Yeah,
I'm eyeing the G4, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I bought it is simply because I just don't have the budget for a brand new one. And the screen I did have was just annoying me with this kind of like the fact that the left-hand side was not as
couldn't
bright.
deal with that.
It was just, baffling. Anyway, let's move on. A final news story of the week, and it is Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore. Woohoo. It's out now. Not typical Digital Foundry fare, but John, you've actually been involved in the creation of this game, and it's out now.
Yes, I just wanted to throw that out there for everyone. I've talked about it before, but it is out. It is a spiritual successor to the CDI Zelda games, only it's good. That's the difference.
Because everybody demanded it.
Everybody demanded it. It filled memes for years with that amazing work from Animation Magic back in the day. But my buddy Seth was like, what if we actually made a sequel? And he was the one actually that did the quote unquote remakes of the CDI games for Windows some years ago, if you remember, and then was able to leverage this to turn it into a full original game. And I think it's great. And the reaction actually has been also really great, to the point where it was beyond expectations. Cause it's with something like this, right? You're like, how many people are really going to get what this is trying to be and enjoy it as it is? And we just weren't sure. But in the end, we're at Metacritic 77 right now, which I think is pretty darn good, actually, for this.
Okay.
And most of the reviewers seem to like it, actually. And yeah, it's a 2D action platformer. It's got a non-linear structure, but it's not a typical Metroidvania. It's like it's a series of, you have this world map and you basically pick your locations from the world map. and you unlock more as you progress through it, but you go back into levels and out of levels as you gain new powers and abilities and sort of slowly break apart the game. I think it plays really well, and all the story stuff is told through ridiculous hand animated cutscenes, which those artists, they totally nailed that look of that CDI stuff.
They did a great job.
Right? Like the idea was like, okay, it needs to look like, because on the CDI games, they would do these like fake camera zooms where it's like zooming in and out of like the characters, but it was just on the static background. So like the videos themselves are actually like, it's chroma keyed stuff. Like Seth wrote a really nice shader to do real time chroma key within Game Maker, which was not trivial, because Game Maker is not really great for video playback. And this is all video stuff, but it works. It works pretty well. I did a lot of work on the level and the game design stuff, and I think it turned out really well in the end. I hope you guys get a chance to play it at some point and share your thoughts.
I played the pre-release build that you sent over to me that I thought was pretty sick.
We figured out that that I setting to change with because the Game Maker defaults, it's like, what if you play it on an ultra potato PC, and it caused some frame time inconsistencies.
It's that was so interesting. There was a setting that I don't know, it was like something to do with the game update or how much it's preserving from the processor. Exactly. But if it's set too low, a fast PC will stutter, which is interesting. And that took a little bit to figure out. But I really liked the level art quite a lot in the little sections that I played. It also controlled smoothly, which is, I think, very, very important. And it was just a smooth scrolling experience. I liked it.
So it's out now digitally, and Limited Run also is selling a physical version, of course,
with
right?
CDI controllers.
You can get the special edition with replica CDI controllers. Okay. The single-handed puck. It's a USB one. It actually works with anything you want, and I say it sucks for action games, but it also rules because it's like the ultimate like one-handed RPG controller. Because you just sit back, chill. You know, you got this thing in your one hand. You're just going. It works. I cannot believe that they actually made that thing, but it's actually really cool. I love it. I mean, you know, obviously we're not doing like a normal DF tech review on this. I was thinking at some point maybe Seth and Audie as well, who was obviously huge involved in this. Might do a stream at some point where we kind of run through like basically some of the development stuff. We can show the editor and show how the levels were made. If you're interested to see how this all comes together, maybe that's something we'll do. So
okay.
In the meantime,
that's awesome, John.
You've got a higher Metacritic than Days Gone.
What?
Yeah,
we'll take it.
Isn't Days Gone like a 60?
It's a 71.
Something?
You're on 77. You're generally favourable.
I will say, I feel like the reviews are a little overly harsh on Days Gone. Days Gone's
I agree. I think it's
pretty darn good.
Days Gone's a fine game.
It's a good game. It really is, and it does some cool stuff with there.
Absolutely.
It actually has like good survivalist mechanics for a zombie game. I think it's
tried to solve fast travel, or tried to solve open world travel by making like fuel a resource. You know, things like that. It was cool.
That sounds totally
cool. Yes, Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore, out now.
Okay, good stuff. Let's move on to supporter Q&A now, which is the part of the show where every week we petition our supporters on the DF supporter program to essentially pitch their questions, whether it's on the news topics of the week, as you've already heard, or on other stuff. A big bunch of them, and we try to distill it down into the ones we have time for, / the ones we can meaningfully answer. And we're going to kick off with this question from Ishvak. Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus are much better than standard HDR10, but from my experience, very few games support it. Why is the games industry lagging behind film / television in this respect? This is an interesting question, right, John? Because generally, not just Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus, we've got a bit of a HDR problem in the games business at the moment, right?
Yeah, it's not just about Dolby Vision, which, by the way, is not actually a standard supported by all TVs anyway. Like, I think Samsung doesn't support Dolby Vision, so it's not something you can count on. So I can kind of see why it hasn't taken off in a big way. But at the same time, the larger problem is just that HDR is either missing or poorly implemented in a lot of new games. And it feels like it's kind of gotten worse. I feel like there was a while where HDR was almost always expected in big new releases, but these days it almost feels like it's hit and miss, where you really can't be sure if it's going to have HDR at all. And then if it does, is it going to be well implemented? And that sucks. And I've actually spoken with developers about this before, and so some of it just comes down to like implementing the stuff to tune it, to make it look good. A lot of them don't have the experience or the hardware to do that. And you actually need proper like displays to test all this on. I think it's becoming more prolific, so you'd think it would improve, but I still feel like there's a little bit of a pushback to it. Just in terms of tuning everything, making sure the artists are happy with the way it looks in HDR, and a bunch of different things that seems to just lead to them saying just like, you know what, screw it, we're not doing HDR. So far too often. But man, when HDR sings, it really sings. And I feel like there's got to be a way to convince more people. I feel like that's another thing. A lot of developers work on these games. They're working on PC monitors at the office, not HDR. And at home, they very likely may or may not actually have a decent HDR capable TV. So you really can't count on it, especially heavy PC users, because PC HDR is kind of in the ghetto right now still. There's not that many. We're getting more and more OLED monitors now, but for a long time, HDR on the PC was just terrible. It was just these stupid LCDs with like 400 nit max. Like they called it HDR 400, which I think did a ton of damage to HDR actually, because people would buy these displays, think, oh, it's HDR, turn it on, it looks terrible, and then in their mind, HDR is bad. That was a huge misfire.
Or worse, still irrelevant because
Yeah, exactly. So that did so much damage, I think, just towards the public perception as well. But I feel like if anybody's seen this stuff, seen it working well, you change your tune because it's transformative. So please, anybody listening, if you're working on a cool new game and it doesn't have HDR, you can make your graphics better by implementing good HDR. It will make it pop. And I feel like most TVs sold today are going to be good with HDR. OLED's now popular. Everybody's making them. The chances of there being good OLED or HDR, even on LCD space, even in LCD and the micro LED stuff coming out, there's just more HDR stuff out there than ever. It's time. We need more games to consistently support this. And for those that have, I'd say thank you, because there have been some great games out there that do awesome HDR support. The one I'm really excited to see is I hope it has HDR better. Is No Rest for the Wicked, the new one from Moon Studios. Because I still think,
bearing in mind,
I'd imagine
because Ori, man, the second Ori game I think has still like top 3 HDR implementation of all time. It's unbelievable looking. Just like
I used it in the Steam Deck OLED reviews precisely for that reason, because it really said to me, this is like a handheld, LG OLED TV experience.
Exactly. It really feels
astonishing.
that way.
I was just completely blown away by it. I think that's another thing which I would like to commend Valve on, is the idea that we've now got this mainstream device that actually has state-of-the-art HDR, which may help drive more adoption, hopefully.
Yeah, especially on PC. That'd be great.
Yeah. Thoughts on this one, Alex? Because you've been looking at content this week.
Yeah,
you've been in HDR.
I've been HDR all week, all day, every day. Given what I've seen of the post-process stuff, I'm actually pretty happy with the way that looks in most games. So even if a game doesn't ship with a good one, I feel like you can get an okay enough experience on PC should this be a thing that comes out in an official form. I'm talking about this RTX HDR stuff that a video should be out hopefully by the time. I'm still just finishing the last little bits of it. But yeah, in the PC space, I'm also disappointed in the lack of standardization beyond just straight HDR10. And but I think that's just because, once again, if you have multiple standards, like I don't even know what you do at that point. Like, it's hard enough to get developers to like make a good PC version sometimes in the first place. Like, then also HDR on top.
Well, it should be part and parcel of just general development, right? Because it should be happening on consoles.
I know, but I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes my faith wavers. I don't trust a lot of things. Yeah.
Okay. what do you think specifically about the point being made about Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus? Is it just the fact that not every screen does it, so not everybody supports it, but there is Dolby Vision support out there?
There is.
Does it require additional effort over standard HDR or?
I mean, it requires a little extra effort, I suppose, but it's more, Dolby Vision's weird because it gives more control technically because you're no longer dealing with static metadata. But also Dolby Vision is designed to be something that you don't mess with, right?
Yeah.
It outputs what it outputs and your TV accepts that and works. It limits what's possible, which now means that all of that stuff, all the luminance and the way everything works together is like in the control of the developer. So the thing about HDR10 is that there's a lot of adjustments the users can do to improve it or fix it and make it look how they want. And you lose all that with Dolby Vision, which can often lead to a presentation that maybe isn't so eye-popping if it wasn't done well. Like good Dolby Vision is awesome, but when Dolby Vision is mediocre or bad, there's really no way to fix it. You know what I mean? And that can be kind of annoying, I suppose.
Okay.
So it just demands more from the developer, basically.
Okay, fair enough. Anything more to add to this? I don't think so. I'm quite looking forward to seeing your video, Alex, but just specifically, it was a feature released by Nvidia which allowed for HDR to be applied to SDR video content, right? And what this mod is doing is essentially saying it's not just video, it can actually be applied to all content in a way that Microsoft already does with Auto HDR, right?
Yeah, and it's even more in depth and it's higher quality. So it's interesting to see in practice. And I think based upon what the modders say, it's actually like the way it's laid out with the driver, it's actually like a planned feature for RTX GPUs. It's looking that way. Just a matter of, I have no idea when they would announce this. It's not the first time things sneak into a driver beforehand and are technically possible to use before they're official. The NVIDIA driver is interesting in the fact that you can actually take advantage of it, like its hidden features due to the NVIDIA's profile inspector, which is like a different tool altogether. It's not put out by NVIDIA. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff with the NVIDIA driver that sometimes, like when I look at stuff like this, features like this, I think like, man, Intel's got a lot of catching up to do. Or AMD, I love their driver. Well, I like how fast it is. I don't want to say I love their front end, but I love how fast it is. Yeah. But I still think like they don't have like things like RTX HDR video or the super samplings options or SGSSAA or whatever. So there's a lot of things where I think oh man, this is just another notch in the NVIDIA belt.
The NVIDIA belt
dominance.
Yeah. They should sell one of those actually, like an actual NVIDIA belt.
With a jacket too.
Yeah.
The belt of dominance, the NVIDIA belt of dominance. It can have that like eye logo,
AI-powered
just like as
belt buckle.
The the NVIDIA eye logo. I would love that.
It's. I was just looking actually, going back to the Arzette stuff, John.
Yeah.
Link on the CDI. Link, the Faces of Evil, and Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon.
Yes.
Gamelon's a great name.
The Wand of Gamelon, the Belt of Dominance.
Good band, by the way.
It fits in, the Belt of Dominance.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. This one comes from, it's SJ33 in brackets Jake. Shall we do a 1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Jake.
Hi, Jake.
Awesome. Jake's question, are performance modes a mistake? They made a lot of sense with the Pro consoles and during the cross-gen period. However, they've become expected to the point that developers will be criticized for not including a 60 FPS mode. Some people have unrealistic expectations of what is essentially 2020 mid-range hardware. It's natural that developers will want to push the hardware more as the generation goes on, but may feel held back due to having to accommodate a 60 FPS mode. This felt like the case with Final Fantasy XVI, where the performance mode felt like a last-minute panicked addition that was clearly asking too much. As a PC user, I love HFR as much as the next person, but on consoles we need to be sensible with expectations and also give developers the freedom to use the hardware how they see fit for their creative ambitions. A lock 30 with good frame pacing makes a lot of sense. John?
Always the voice of reason, Jake. I'd say the problem is less the performance modes and more the problem with the way communities behave these days about this stuff. I think developers should be able to set whatever target they realistically can deliver, as long as that target is maintained and consistent, right?
Right.
Like Final Fantasy 16 is a case where I would argue, I would agree with him that it feels like the performance mode was tacked on at the last minute. And the problem with that is that hitting 60 FPS or hitting your target requires this. It's like a holistic thing from the beginning of development, where everyone needs to be on board with that target early on in order to optimize for it. And if you're not doing that, you can't just throw it in. And it feels like 16 definitely just had it thrown in at the end, and it's like not able to hit that target. And so it's bad. So they probably should have just left it out. But I do think that it's still something to offer. And if the developer can realistically hit it and deliver a good performance and a good quality mode, then I think it's absolutely something that should be included, because different people have different priorities on that stuff. I think the PlayStation examples are still the best, especially like the stuff that we've seen from like Insomniac. They're just like, whatever. If you want a perfectly locked 30 with perfect frame pacing and like the highest visuals, here you go. You can have a 40 FPS mode. You can have a quality mode uncapped, but with VRR. You can have a 60 FPS mode. You can have a performance mode that goes over 60 with VRR. You can have it with RT on or off in some cases. Like, I think that's great to offer that choice. And I wouldn't want to see that go away, because they actually delivered the goods. But if basically bad mode shouldn't be in there is I think the point. But if you can do it, then it should be there. And I think this gen has actually been pretty good overall in terms of 60 FPS compared to the last two generations. There's way more 60 frames per second console games than we'd seen in a long time, since the PS2 era, I would say. It feels like most games these days do by default run at 60, or at least have a 60 option. It's actually fairly uncommon when something's capped to 30. And I think it's okay if it's capped to 30. It's not optimal, but if there's a reason for it, I can be accepting of that. Like for Starfield, for instance, it didn't really bother me that it was capped at 30 on Xbox. And like I said, 16, I would have been happier. I recommended the quality mode. I honestly think that putting a performance mode in was a mistake, because it made the game feel less polished than it actually was if you used that mode. So I don't know. What do you guys think of this?
I mean, yeah, I pretty much would echo everything you would say. And I also think Jake's right to say that certain technical ambitions the game might have, especially from the beginning of the project, like, if you say like, we want this game to have some sort of level of interactivity in the world that other games don't typically do, but it's going to necessitate we target 33 milliseconds per frame. I think that's a reasonable thing to do for a console platform. It's not, I wouldn't play the game there necessarily as a result, but I think that's the consumer's choice in the end, and they shouldn't necessarily just force developers to do a 60 FPS mode. You can force the developer with your buying the game or not buying the game, but then like making like a whole storm on Twitter about it or something. Like, I don't know. Not my
something
thing.
else I want to add to this, though. There was talk about Dragon's Dogma 2 this week, where they're like, oh yeah, it's just going to be unlocked. And I think that's a case where that was said. It's variable frame rate. So
no,
right. And
that's bad.
So I agree that an unlocked frame rate should be available in those cases. And I think it's okay to offer that on consoles, especially for forward looking hardware, but for the day one experience, if you're running with a very unstable frame rate, and maybe it won't be, but all previous stuff has been, they should offer a capped 30 option, totally optional, but it should still be there, I think, for consistent.
This is such a Capcom thing to do. What is this? Like,
I don't know.
They do this No Man's Land frame rate stuff way too often.
Yeah, it's not good.
Like, I'm really afraid Dragon's Dogma 2 on console is going to be, they said they're pushing RT in it on PC, so it's probably going to target RT on console as well too, based on their presentations. Like, I don't think this thing's a constant 60 at all.
And
like,
so
offer a frame rate
At
cap.
the very least, on Xbox, because if you run in 120 hertz mode, you get the large range of VRR, so VRR users should be okay. PlayStation could be okay if they implement the 120 mode as well, which they've done before. But if they allow it to run in 120, then they can have low frame rate compensation. But if it's just a 60 hertz game, this could be a real mess on the PS5.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, basically we've got a lot of demands being placed on developers. We've had, calls for more physically, active games that's going to require a lot of CPU, which basically limits you to 30, 40 at that point. And then, I'm just went back through the supporter questions, and there's this one from Roach. Hi DF, why do you think some developers of AAA cross-platform games are content with the resolution dropping as low as 720p on PS5 and Series X using DRS that was considered the target for an Xbox 360 that was released 18 years ago? In 2024, shouldn't developers be targeting a minimum of 1440p as an example? So we don't get the blurry mess we've been seeing in some games. I say leave the high-end effects like ray tracing for high-end PC and give console players games that don't drop to sub 30 FPS, preferably 60, with resolutions dropping below 900p. Well, this is the thing, right? Everybody wants different things from their games, and ultimately we've got to trust the developers in what they're doing, and assuming that they know what they're doing and what's best for the consumer. I'm thinking of games with performance modes like, for example, Alan Wake 2 and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which do bottom out 720p internal, but I still think those performance modes are good things to have, right? I'd rather they were there than not there, but at the same time, if it's limiting the creative vision, I do think we have to respect the developer's decision on that one. But yes, I do see that there is an expectation level there and a certain sense of entitlement. Really going to be interesting to see what happens when GTA 6 comes out, because similar to Starfield, I just don't think 60 is going to be viable there. Yeah. I am curious about Starfield, whether it will get that performance upgrade at some point, even if it's like VRR only. I'd really like to see that. I think it could be all right.
I think so.
I think based on that PC experience, I think that would be completely all right.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one from Alexander Seidel. Considering you already talked about GPUs not being directly comparable anymore because of the advantage of DLSS-related tech, would that make Nvidia GPUs an attractive choice for console makers? What would Nvidia have to offer to become the preferred choice? And would Nvidia even be interested in that? Can AMD even afford to lose the console market? So this kind of sort of goes back to what we were discussing earlier. And it's an interesting question. I think to begin with, they've got to be able to strike a deal that's equitable to the console makers in the first place, which was the whole issue going back to the OG Xbox and I think the RSX as well with PlayStation 3.
Nvidia held the keys there, right? Like, because that was the Toshiba graphics card ended up failing on that side. That they were developing for PS3, and they needed an emergency solution, and Nvidia was there. So
tellingly, they never went back, either of them, Microsoft. But we are seeing a situation now with Nintendo where seemingly they are going back, and an equitable deal has been made. So I think that's the first criteria of an Nvidia console, right? Which is that the corporate bean crunching works out for both parties. Because famously, as I said, they never went back. Sony and Microsoft never went back. Where do you want to go with this one, John? Beyond the money side of the situation.
I mean, I think it would. The last part of the question where he says, "Can they afford?" I think it would be a disaster for AMD to lose these contracts. And as a result, if there was threat of this, I feel like it might. I could see them, let's say Microsoft switched to Nvidia. They already have Nintendo. I could see them working, Sony coming in, working with these guys to really try to, push them to the next level somehow. It would be interesting to see what's possible there, but I feel like they would do everything they could to retain that relationship then, if this were to happen, because it does feel like it's been easy to excuse some of AMD's choices in the PC space, given their focus on working with these two major console manufacturers. and they're not really. They haven't been competing with Nvidia at the same level for years now, I would say. Oh man, I'm going to get
myself. In terms of edge features, for sure. I mean, raster performance, they're doing really well.
Yeah, but raster performance is it's last gen. It's kind of no.
Well, if we go back to the question, what would make Nvidia GPUs an attractive choice for console makers? First of all, it's actually, as I said, making the deal. But secondly, if we're looking at Microsoft specifically, the closer alignment they have with PC in terms of features, in terms of the forward-looking stuff, in terms of access to the features that Nvidia has made and will be continuing to make over the years, that's actually of massive benefit to Microsoft.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
All the software R&D I actually think ties more into Microsoft's platform than it does Sony.
Yeah.
Who's always been a hardware company and Microsoft's a software company. So, yeah.
Anything more to add to that, Alex?
AI.
I mean, yeah, I would. I think they could. The interesting thing is that they could offer the idea of it being a premium experience that you see also on PC. And I think Nvidia is the key differentiator these days in the PC marketplace. Like when people talk about, I think really do when people talk about like, oh, you can play that on PC with like better graphics. They're talking about stuff like DLSS and ray tracing. They aren't talking about, just like better raster performance.
Slightly
I don't think
higher
that
resolution shadow maps.
Yeah, slightly higher resolution shadow maps and stuff like that. That is maybe what it was in like 2011 or to 2015 or something like that. But I think nowadays it's quite different. So I think they could say like, this is the premium Xbox, and they could offer that. And on the Nintendo Switch side, the offering there is like Nvidia is almost invisible there.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting, actually. It's not at all part of the branding.
Yeah. And not even in terms of features for the Switch One, because it's just a standard Tegra X1. There's nothing special going on there. Yeah, Switch 2, if it is utilizing DLSS or ray tracing in some way, obviously it will be a touch more visible, but they're still not going to be marketing it beyond announcing a strategic relationship, right? But yeah, the concept that Microsoft in particular aligns with what's happening in the PC space would be broadly more beneficial to them, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can't really see, in terms of AMD affording to lose, AMD affords to lose the console market? Well, they could strike a better deal, which is historically how they got those contracts in the first place, right? And secondly, we shouldn't expect them to stay still. They realise there's a mountain to climb in terms of matching the feature set. That it's not just Nvidia, it's Intel doing it as well. They've got threats from all sides. From that perspective, can they afford to lose the console market? Well, they're doing great at the moment in the PC space, in the server space. So they probably could afford to lose it, right? But they probably wouldn't want to. Seems fairly straightforward. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one from the mighty Ethan. Hi DF, exclamation point. Squenix, I guess that's Square Enix, says they're going to release a patch for the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth demo on February the 21st to fix the image quality and performance mode. Based on your understandably limited look at the demo, do you think the image quality problems are something that are likely to be able to be fixed with such a quick patch, or are they more fundamental? Thanks, exclamation point. John, do you want to take this one? Because I think fundamentally the answer is they can fix it, right?
Yeah, I think one, they can fix it, and they wouldn't say otherwise if they couldn't. But knowing the resolution specs, I mean, it's pretty much dynamic between 1080 and 1440, which is the same as it was for the 7 remake Integrate or whatever it was called on PS5. So the pixel counts are there. That was never the issue, even though it looks much worse. I think they need to make some adjustments to how their post-processing is working or something else on their side to fix this, and it's quite doable. I think it would actually be easier, but maybe similar to what happened with Horizon Forbidden West, where they made massive adjustments to their TAA post-release, which dramatically improved image quality for the performance mode. I think we'll see something similar here. But this is just an Unreal Engine game as well, and I'm sure.
Well, that's the question I've got. I mean, why are we in this situation in the first place when similar resolutions to what we saw in Integrate, right? So
I think they made some weird choices with the way they're doing some of the post-processing effects, that they want this really soft but like mostly aliasing free image, because it is like, it's very effective at reducing stair stepping. There's not much visible normally. It's really soft. Maybe sometimes in the cutscenes, it could argue it looks more like a pre-rendered CG movie as a result. But in the gameplay, with all that distant detail, especially with these long view distances that the game seems to offer based on that first scene, it doesn't look good. It's too soft. So I think they need to tweak that, and I think they will. It's just unfortunate that it says February 21st for that. That's pretty. It's getting close to release.
What is the release?
One thing I'm very curious about is this Unreal Engine 4.
Yeah.
Which version of Unreal Engine 4 are they using is another question.
How do we
because
even
this
know?
is such a long-winded project. This is so long-winded. And maybe they're sharing like game code over all of these, and they don't want to upgrade the entire engine because they have another one to release in 5 years or whatever too. So like maybe they're on like 4.19, and TAA is way different in 4.19 versus 4.27, let alone the fact that TAAU exists in later versions, or TSR's early versions also exist in UE4. So there's a lot of things like I can't completely know everything, but I feel like if they added in TAAU instead of just flat TAA, probably bilinear upscale to the output, that would do wonders too, and it wouldn't be that much more expensive than normal TAA, and the game's already using DRS in the first place. So I think that would be one way to look at it, and another thing would, I don't know. The rest of it John already talked about, but I feel like if they added in TAAU, a lot people would be more happy with the image quality than it currently is.
I think it's pretty much always a Lancho's final sample to the output resolution these days. I mean, the consoles have got
nowadays
these crazy multi-tap filters. Lots
I'm
of
just
taps,
saying, like, so
they may not be doing that.
I don't think they're using that. I think they're just doing like internally in Unreal,
Right,
like you can have there's like a bunch of them, and they added bicubic. It was always bilinear until they added a bicubic one, like I can't remember when, but I think they're using that. So bilinear 1080p up to like
the thing
4K.
is though, is even when the game's running at native,
I don't know, that
native
doesn't look
4K
good.
in quality mode, which it does often, it still looks really, really soft. You would be forgiven for thinking it was like 1440p when it's actually native 4K. so
it's just a theory, John, but you're suggesting that it's to get a more cinematic CG look.
I don't know if it's intentional or not, but during the sequence, like during cinemas, with all the depth of field going on and the way the characters look there, it reminded me more of what you see when you pop in like a Blu-ray of a CG movie, where there's basically like no real visible aliasing at all. It's extremely clean, but it's softer, like films often tend to be. That's kind of the look I got from it, but I don't think that's a great choice for a game, at least once you're in the gameplay. It's okay in the cutscenes, but once you're in the gameplay, it's not good.
I'm just reminded, I mean, on Timothy Lott's old blog many, many, many years ago, it's now been deleted, but he basically started talking about how the pristine nature of video game graphics doesn't have any relation to what happens in movies. And, I think he had a screenshot of the original Iron Man from the Blu-ray print, which was looking really, really soft. And he said, this isn't really native 1080p or words to that effect. And then what was quite interesting was to see the response from other developers in the comments. And one of them was, I think, might have been from Pixar. This is a long, long time ago, but they were saying, we use a lot of MSAA and a lot of blur.
Yeah, I remember that comment too. Yeah, it's like adding in extra blur passes to make it look more cinematic.
They totally might have done that here. I could absolutely see them having done that.
I mean, developers do things like barrel distortion and chromatic aberration, and depending upon how you do them, like real chromatic aberration should be a blur. It shouldn't just be a pixel shift. Right. So, who knows?
Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one from Chini Konkani. And the question is this: Vulkan was mentioned in one of your videos recently. I remember it was supported in a few games, but then seemed to largely disappear. Whatever happened to it? Did DX12 take over thanks to ray tracing? Well, I'm not sure about that, Alex, but there is definitely a downward trend in Vulkan utilization, right? What's going on?
Well, depending on who you ask. Obviously, if you target DirectX, you get Xbox in there too, so it's pretty good win. Targeting Vulkan, though, like we see from id Software, I think it's more their adherence to certain like principles regarding I don't know. It's like always been an OpenGL company before that. But right now with Vulkan, people are saying that it's going through OpenGL extension hell, where you cannot necessarily want to support everything that you really want to support on it because you're not sure if the hardware is going to support it in the end that you're shipping with the game.
Right.
And there's also the fact that it tends to get some features later than DirectX. I think isn't very helpful. The Vulkan ray tracing standard came quite a bit after the DirectX one. It's a consortium, so it doesn't have Microsoft strong arming or Nvidia strong arming for that matter, or something like that.
It's more reactive than proactive.
Yeah, it's been a bit reactive. It had some proactive stuff. The recent way to get around PSO issues was very interesting, but nothing's using it so far to my knowledge. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So I think it's the fact that it is like OpenGL. At some point in time, OpenGL was also not very popular at all. Like, it would be pretty rare to see an OpenGL game, and that's why it was totally fine for ATI to ship totally bad OpenGL drivers for more than a decade, because there were so few OpenGL games, no one cared. So in this case, though, I think it's a lot of that Vulkan extension hell that I just keep reading about, like how people are not happy with the direction that the API went in as being a clean slate from OpenGL's. Like, OpenGL also had this problem.
I just miss Mantle.
Really?
No, it's basically DirectX 12.
Yeah.
It was kind of like co-opted into DX12, essentially, from what I gather.
Yeah, it is DX12 and to a certain degree. Yeah.
Okay, but nothing more to add.
Everyone stands on the shoulders of Mantle.
Yeah,
I was kind of expecting, when the PlayStation ports would arrive on PC, I was kind of half expecting that they would be looking towards Vulkan rather than DX12, but it never really seemed to happen. They went full DX12 except for God of War, of course, which
you never go full DX12.
DX11.
Never go full DX11.
Yeah. I always forget that is the DX11 port, by the way, Rich. Like, almost every time I'm like, because it has FSR2 and FSR2 still doesn't officially support DX11.
Right.
So it's always interesting.
So they did some sort of cross port over for that.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that is the end of the show and the last question. So if you enjoyed it, please do like, subscribe, share, ring the bell for notionally instant notifications. I'm now getting notifications from DF clips, by the way.
Ooh.
But
me too.
No more Random Gaming in HD, which is a bit of a disappointment. DF supporter program. Join us, join our amazing community, get high quality video downloads of everything we do, early access to a bunch of stuff, weekly updates about what we're up to. Every week we have a Monday morning content meeting, and then directly after that I write it up and share the notes with everybody, so you know exactly what we're up to and you can make suggestions. And of course, there's the call for question for DF Direct Weekly as well. So yeah, please do consider that. But that's all from us on this milestone 150th edition. And guess we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.